It is the 30th of October, and our reading this day in Baptist history is Balance, Books, and Boldness. Our verse comes from 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 1. The elders which are among you I exhort, who am also an elder, and a witness of the sufferings of Christ, and also a partaker of the glory that shall be revealed. Two unique personalities and eminent scholars served as pastor and assistant of the Baptist Church in Petty France, London, England, during the 17th century. While both men are worthy of our consideration, we know comparatively little about either. The two men are Reverend Nehemiah Cox, who died in 1688, and Reverend William Collins, whose homegoing took place on October 30th, 1702. Nehemiah Cox has been spoken of as a, and I quote, very excellent, learned, and judicious divine, end of quote. Reverend Cox was a native of Bedford, England, and was received into the membership of the Baptist Church there on June 14, 1669, while John Bunyan was one of its preachers, but 2 years before Bunyan became the pastor. It is firmly believed that Mr. Cox was baptized by John Bunyan. In April of 1673, Reverend Cox was called to the pastoral office by the Baptist congregation in Hitchin, near Bedford, England, but he declined the offer. One of the records avows that Reverend Cox was also imprisoned in the Bedford jail for preaching the gospel. Following that incarceration, he settled as pastor of the Baptist Church in Cranfield in Bedfordshire, and then in 1675 he joined with Reverend William Collins, serving as his assistant pastor in the Baptist Church of Petty France, London. Reverend Nehemiah Cox is best remembered for his wit in a court case. When presenting his own defense, Reverend Cox pled his cause in Greek and then in Hebrew, claiming that he had the right to use any language that he chose. The judge dismissed the case, saying, and I quote, "Well, the shoemaker has wound us all up, gentlemen," end of quote. Reverend William Collins was the elder pastor of the Petty France Church, and we are told that he pursued his academic studies in both Italy and France before returning to England to study theology. During the course of his studies, Mr. Collins embraced Baptist principles, and though offered pulpits in the Church of England, he graciously refused. After completing his study, began to seek the mind of Christ concerning where he should serve. He had been preaching in area Baptist churches, but entered into a season of prayer and fasting that the will of God might be made clear. On one particular occasion, Mr. Collins spent the day alone in the presence of the Lord in prayer. That very evening, he received a letter of invitation from the Baptist Church in Petty France in London. Believing that this was surely the hand of the Lord, Mr. Collins agreed to visit the congregation. That visit concluded in a unanimous call, and the result was a happy marriage of pastor and people. Reverend Collins was a gifted man, and it would have been easy to have preached from the stored divine knowledge that he possessed, but he would not serve God with that which cost him nothing. He was facetious in his preparation, and he drew deeply from the spiritual truths of justification, sanctification, and imputed righteousness, that he might feed his people well from the sacred scriptures. All of his preparation to preach was done in the original languages, as he sought to ascertain accurately the word of God for his people. It is said that his preaching was, and I quote, free from the wild raptures of enthusiasm and the dull formalities of superstition, end of quote. His life was such that on his deathbed a visiting pastor said to him, and I quote, "Sir, I hope you are not afraid to die." He answered with great presence of mind and a cheerful countenance, "I bless God I have not been afraid to die these 40 years, end of quote. I have used these two men to illustrate several facts. First, though many Baptist preachers of bygone days were not allowed the benefits of a broad education, There were still an ample number who were adequately versed in Hebrew and Greek and could defend the Baptist distinctives without apology. To be sure, they were not the majority among Baptist preachers, but there were sufficient number of men to guarantee a credible response to the pedo-Baptists. Secondly, the biographer's statement concerning Reverend Collins's balance in not submitting to flights of enthusiasm or to dull formalities is of significance to fundamental Baptist churches today, as they are successfully serving the Lord without the extremes of either foolish fanaticism or frigid formalism. Finally, though William Collins and Nehemiah Cox were presented as co-pastors, one was definitely the elder pastor, while the other was his assistant. Though many modern-day students are clamoring for multiple elders, there must be an ultimate singular leader, else confusion will reign. To God be the glory.